Now, for the most recently written story in this first series of May's Miniatures, the almost arcane of lockdown entertainments. Muriel Spark was born in 1918 in Edinburgh, so this was published when she was 80 years old. There is no sign here that the writer of such sharp, vivid and strange novels as The Ballad of Peckham Rye and The Prime of Miss Jean Brodie was in decline or losing her salience. In 1998, Britain was entering its seventh full year without a recession. The average person was doing reasonably well economically. The homeowner, say, with a permanent job, was doing extraordinarily well, and these people happily voted for Blair's New Labour in 1997. A shout-out is due to the formidable actress Tilda Swinton on this one. My selection is really down to her selection of this story in a recent issue of Sight and Sound. I remember how she spoke on a DVD extra about the great British director Derek Jarman and paid tribute to his profound creativity and adventurousness. It is really a great shame he never got around to adapting a Muriel Spark story or novel. Expect funny. Expect pointed. Expect a dissection of that perennial British obsession, social class.
Muriel Spark, The Snobs, 1998. Snob, a person who sets too much value on social standing, wishing to be associated with the upper class and their mores, and treating those viewed as inferior with condescension and contempt. Chambers Dictionary. I feel bound to quote the above definition. It so well fits the Ringer-Smith couple, whom I knew in the 1950s, and of whom I have since met variations and versions enough to fill me with wonder. Snobs are really amazing. They mainly err in failing to fool the very set of people they are hoping to be accepted by, and above all to seem to belong to be taken for. They may live in a democratic society. It does nothing to help. Nothing. Of the Ringer-Smith couple, he, Jake, was the more snobbish. She, at least, had a certain natural serenity of behaviour, which she herself never questioned. She was, in fact, rather smug. Her background was of small, landowning farmers and minor civil servants. She, Marion, was stingy as hell. Jake also had a civil service background, and on the mother's side a family of fruit export-import affairs, which had not left her very well off, the inheritance having been absorbed by the male members of the family. Jake and Marion were a fairly suitable match. He was slightly the shorter of the two. Both were skinny. They had no children. Skeletons in the family cupboard do nothing to daunt the true snob. In fact, they provoke a certain arrogance, and this was the case with Jake. A family scandal on a national scale had grown to an international one. A spectacular bank robbery with murder on the part of a brother who had resulted in the family name being reduced to a byword in every household. The delinquent Ringer-Smith and his associates had escaped to a safe exile in South America, leaving Jake and his ageing mother to face the music of the press and TV reporters. Nobody would have taken it out on them in the normal way if it had not been for the contempt with which they treated police, journalists, interrogators, functionaries of the law, and the public in general. They put on airs suggesting that they were untouchably good family, and they generally carried on as if they were earls and marquises instead of ordinary middle-class people. No earl, no marquis at present alive would in fact be so haughty unless he were completely out of his mind, or perhaps an unfortunate drug addict or losing gambler. I was staying with some friends at a chateau near Dijon when the Ringer-Smiths turned up. This was in the 90s. I hardly recognised them. The Ringer-Smiths had not just turned up at the chateau, they were found by Anne, bewildered outside the village shop. puzzling over a map, uncertain of their way to anywhere. Warming towards their plight, as she always would towards those in trouble, Anne invited these lost English people for a cup of tea at the chateau, where they could work out their route. Anne and Monty, English themselves, had lived in the chateau for the last 8 years. It was a totally unexpected inheritance from the last member of a distant branch of Monty's family. The house and small fortune that went with it came to him in his early 50s as an enormous surprise. He had been a shoe salesman and a bus driver, among other things. Anne had been a stockbroker's secretary. Their 2 children, both girls, were married and away. The fairy tale story of their inheritance was in the newspapers for a day, but it wasn't everybody who read the passing news. Monty was out when Anne brought home the Ringer Smiths. I was watching the television, some programme which now escapes me forever due to the shock of seeing those people. Anne, tall, merry, blonded up and carrying her 60s well, took herself off to the kitchen to put on the kettle. She had made the sitting room as much like England as possible. "Who does this place belong to?" Jake inquired of me as soon as Anne was out of the room. Obviously he had not recognised me in the present context, although I felt Marian's eyes upon me in a penetrating state of puzzlement, of quasi-remembrance. "It belongs," I said, "to the lady who invited you to tea." "Oh," he said. "Haven't we met?" Marian was speaking to me. "Yes, you have." I made myself known. "What brings you here?" said Jake outright. "The same as brings you here. I was invited." Anne returned with the tea, served with a silver tea service and pretty china cups. She carried the tray while a young girl who was helping in the house followed with hot water and a plate of biscuits. "You speak English very well," Jake said. "Oh, we are English," said Anne, "but we live in France now. My husband inherited the chateau from his family on his mother's side, the Martineaus." "Oh, of course," said Jake. The factor came in from the farm and took a cup of tea, standing up. He addressed Anne as Madame. Anne was already regretting her impulse in asking the couple to tea. They said very little, but just sat on. She was afraid they would miss the last bus to the station. Looking at me, she said, "The last bus goes at 6, doesn't it?" I said to Marian, "You don't want to miss the last bus." "Could we see round the chateau?" said Marian. "The guidebook says it's 14th century. "Well, not all of it is," said Anne. "But today is a bit difficult. We don't, open the house to the public. We live in it." "I'm sure we've met," said Marian to Anne, as if this took care of their catching the last bus, a point which was not lost on Anne. Kindly though she was, I knew she hated to have to ferry people by car to the station and take on other chores she was not prepared for. I could see already in Anne's mind the thought, "I have to get rid of these people or they'll stay for dinner and then all night. They are chateau grabbers." Anne had often lamented to me about the chateau grabbers of her later life. People who didn't want to know her when she was obscure and a bus driver's wife now wanted to know her intimately. Monty didn't care much about this, one way or another, but then the work of organising meals and entertaining in style fell more on Anne than on Monty, who mostly spent his time helping the factor in the grounds, gamekeeping and forest clearing. Anne could see that the English couple she had invited in for a cup of tea were clingers, climbers, general nuisances, and she especially cast a look of desperation at me when Marion Ringer Smith said, "I'm sure we've met." "You think so?" Anne said. She had got up and was leading the way to the back door. "This is the Cour des Adieux," she said. "It leads quicker to your bus stop." Marion stooped and took a cake as if it was her last chance of ever eating a cake again. I was at this moment coming to the end of a novel I was writing. Anne had offered me the peace and quiet of French chateau life and the informality of her own lifestyle, which made it an ideal arrangement. She had also undertaken to type out the novel from any handwritten manuscripts onto a word processor. But now, at 5:45, I could see the rest of our afternoon's plans slipping away. I doubted that Marion had indeed seen Anne before. It was by some mental process of transference that she had picked on Anne. The one she had actually met was myself, but she wasn't very much aware of it. After a gap of 40 years, she remembered very little of me. Jake Ringer Smith asked if he could use the bathroom. "Oh, you bore," I thought. "Why don't you go? There are trees and thick bushes all the way down the drive for you to pee on." But no, he had to be shown the bathroom. It was nearly 10 minutes to their bus time. Jake kicked his backpack over to his wife and said, "Take this, will you?" "I would really like to see around the chateau," Marion said, "while we're here, and since we've come all this way." I had come across this situation before. There are people who will hold up a party of tired and worn fellow travellers just because they have to see a pulpit. There are people who will arrive an hour late for dinner with the excuse that they had to see over some art gallery on the way. Marion was very much one of those. If challenged, she would have thought nothing of pointing out that, after all, she had paid a plane fare to arrive at where she was. I remember Marion's shapeless cheesecloth dress and her worn sandals and Jake's baggy, ostentatiously patched, grubby trousers, their avidity to get on intimate terms with the lady of the house, to be invited to supper and, no doubt, to spend the night. I was really sorry for Anne, who, I was aware, was sorry for herself, and most of all regretting her own impulsive invitation to a cup of tea in her house. Anne kept a soup kitchen in a building some way from the house, beyond a vegetable garden. She was pledged, I knew, to be there and help whenever possible, at 6:30 every evening. Laboriously, she explained this to the Ringer Smiths. "Otherwise, I'd have been glad to show you the house. Not that there's much to see." "Soup kitchen," said Jake. "May we join it for a bowl of soup? Then perhaps we can stretch out our sleeping bag for the night under one of your charming archways and see the house tomorrow." Does this sound like a nightmare? It was a nightmare. Nothing could throw off these people. Down at the soup kitchen that evening, dispensing slabs of bread and cheese with bowls of tomato soup, I was not surprised to see the Ringer Smiths appear. "We belong to the lower orders," he said to me with an exaggeratedly self-effacing grin that meant, "We do not belong to any lower orders, and just see how grand we really are. We don't care what we look like or what company we keep. We are us." In fact, they looked positively shifty among the genuine skin and bone tramps and hairy dropouts and bulging bag ladies. I dished out their portions to them without a smile. They had missed the last bus. Somehow Anne and Monty had to arrange for them to have a bedroom for the night. "We stayed at the Chateau Leclerc de Martineau at Dijon," I could hear them telling their friends. Before breakfast, I advised Anne and Monty to make themselves scarce. Otherwise, I said, you'll never get rid of them. Leave them to me. I'm sure, said Marion, I've met Anne before, but I can't tell where. She has been a cook in many houses, I said, and Monty has been a butler. A cook and a butler? Said Jake. Yes, the master and mistress are away from home at present. But she told me she was the owner, Marion said, indicating the dining room door with her head. Oh no, you must be mistaken. But I'm sure she said... Not at all, I said. What a pity you can't see over the chateau. Such lovely pictures. But the Comtesse will be here at any moment. I don't know how you will explain yourselves. So far as I know, you haven't been invited. Oh, we have, said Jake. The servants begged us to stay. So typical, posing as the lord and lady of the manor. But it's getting late. We'll miss the bus. They were off within 4 minutes, tramping down the drive with their bulging packs. Anne and Monty were delighted when I told them how it was done. Anne was sure, judging from a previous experience, that the intruders had planned to stay for a week. What else can you do with people like that? Said Anne. Put them in a story, if you were me, I said, and sell the story. Can they sue? Let them sue, I said. Let them go ahead, stand up and say, yes, that was us. An eccentric couple. They took the soap with them, said Anne. Monty went off about his business with a smile. So did Anne. And I too, or so I thought. It was 11:30. 2 hours later that morning, when, looking out of the window of my room, as I often do when I am working on a novel, I saw them again, under one of the trees bordering a lawn. They were looking up towards the house. I had no idea where Monty and Anne were at that moment, nor could I think how to locate the factor, Raoul, or his wife, Marie-Louise. This was a disturbance in the rhythm of my morning's work, but I decided to go down and see what was the matter. As soon as they saw me, Marion said, "Oh, hello! We decided it was uncivil of us to leave without seeing the lady of the house and paying our respects." "We'll wait till the Comtesse arrives," Jake stated. "Well, you're unlucky," I said. "I believe there's word come through that she'll be away for a week." "That's all right," said Marion. "We can spare a week." "Only civil?" said Jake. I managed to alert Anne before she saw them. They were very cool to her when she did at last appear before them. "The Comtesse would, I'm sure, be offended if we left without a word of thanks," said Jake. "Not at all," said Anne. "In fact, you have to go." "Not so," said Marion. Raoul tackled them, joined by Monty. Marion had already reclaimed their bedroom. "As the beds had to be changed anyway," she said, "we may as well stay on. We don't mind eating down at the shed." By this she meant the soup kitchen. "We are not above eating with the proletariat," said Jake. Raoul and I searched the house, every drawer, for a key to the door of their bedroom. Eventually we found one that fitted, and succeeded in locking them out. Monty took their packs and dumped them outside the gates of the chateau. These operations took place while they were feeding in the soup kitchen. We all five, Marie-Louise, had joined us, confronted them, and told them what we had done. What happened to them after that, none of us quite knows. We do know that they went to retrieve their bags and found themselves locked out by the factor. Anne received a letter correctly addressed to her as the Comtesse. from Jake, indignantly complaining about the treatment they had received at the hands of the staff. "Something," wrote Jake, "told me not to accept their invitation. I knew instinctively that they were not one of us. I should have listened to my instincts. People like them are such frightful snobs."